Welcome to this Whole Life Club Action Hour on a lifestyle approach to gut and autoimmune disorders. I'm registered dietitian Nicole D'Andrea-Russer, your host for today. Autoimmune disorders affect millions of people, and research shows that gut health plays a pivotal role in immunity, inflammation, and overall vitality. Today, I'll be joined by Dr. Zach Bush, physician and internationally recognized educator on the microbiome, as we explore how lifestyle, environment shape health from the inside out. We'll look at practical strategies for supporting conditions like celiac disease, IBS, and IBD, while also looking at the bigger picture, our food system, toxins, and soil health. This event is part of Whole Life Club, Food Revolution Network's ongoing membership community. Some of today's questions come directly from our members, and just as a reminder, this discussion is for educational purposes only and not a substitute for medical advice. Now let me introduce the wonderful Dr. Zach Bush. Dr. Bush is a physician specializing in internal medicine, endocrinology, and hospice care. He is an internationally recognized educator on the microbiome as it relates to health, disease, and food production systems. Dr. Bush founded Seraphic Group to develop root cause solutions for human and ecological health, and to extend his passion for educating the global community about topics such as soil vitality, the elimination of toxins like glyphosate from our food system, and the importance of gut-brain communication as a cornerstone of overall health and well-being. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Dr. Bush. It's so wonderful to have you.
It's such an honor to be with Nicole. Thank you for you and the audience the time.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation, as I know our members are as well. So I'd love to start with you and what led you to become so passionate about root cause solutions for human and planetary health.
My journey was through a very allopathic Western medicine training, University of Colorado, then University of Virginia. I was in academia for about 17 years in that space of looking for solutions to disease outside of the human body. And that would end me in that career in about a 5-year journey into chemotherapy development, working through my specialty in endocrinology and metabolism. I was working instead of on the human cell, I was working on the little tiny microbes that live inside of the human cell, which are called mitochondria. And it was in studying those mitochondria and mechanisms of eliminating cancer through feeding the cell rather than poisoning the cell that created this paradigm flip in my head of realizing that there was nothing to fight against, but there was something to nurture back into health.
Amazing. Thank you. Well, we're grateful that you found that route. How does the gut microbiome shape the immune system? We hear so much about the gut microbiome these days and its importance in overall health. And what role does it play in autoimmune conditions like Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, or celiac disease?
Because of our, early adoption of concepts around the microbiome existing in the gut, I think, have still become stuck in the paradigm thinking that gut health is something separate from the body. There's the gut and then there's the body. Where the science has really matured to over the last 20 years is the realization that the entire body is a confluent ecosystem. That ecosystem is something that is constantly generating the life force and the collective imagination for your body. Your body is the imagination of nature, and it's only for the concentration of light energy that's generated from the interface between food, the microbiology of the body, and the mitochondria within the cells that allow for this journey into the concentration of light, which becomes life. And so when we feel our life force declining, we can bet that it has something to do with the ability to bring that energy in and liberate that energy from our food system. And so the journey that we can now start to appreciate is that when we talk about the microbiome, we're really talking about an organic system that runs through the entire gamut of the body. It is no longer relegated to the gut. It's actually something that exists in every single organ of the body. When I went through med school, and frankly, the medical students going through today, we're definitely trained that a bacteria in the body is bad. Okay, there's some bacteria on the skin. Okay, there's some bacteria in the gut, but Lord knows if you have it in your bloodstream, then you're septic. What we're slowly coming to terms with is that there is microbiome throughout the entire system. There is no sterility in a healthy human body. The healthy human body is teeming with microorganisms that are creating the organic process of life, which is an interconnected relationship. Biosis, as a concept, is life force. Biosis refers to the interconnected relationships that make life possible. So when we think the microbiome, what we're really speaking to is the interconnected relationships that make our life possible. And the antibiosis or antibiotic era of the last 100 years has radically undermined this reality of connectivity. For that, we see this emergence of dysfunction within the body. And the first place that this begins is in the gut. And it's at the lining of the gut that we would call the epithelial lining. It's a single cell layer thick, half the width of a human hair. And so it's this tiny little cellophane layer of reality that separates the outside world from the inside world of the human body. And we used to think of this again as like this ironclad, curtain with a battle zone of the immune system right behind it to protect you from everything outside. Now we realize that the immune system is not a battleground. It's actually a system of relationships, and it's a handshake at every level across hundreds of thousands of species that will ultimately collaborate to produce the health and potential energy for a human body to exist. And that handshake environment, that relationship management of the immune system takes an enormous amount of energy in and of itself. If you've ever been in a relationship, you know how much of your life force you put into communication and maintenance of the relationship and cohabitating with somebody else in the same home. That's where most of your energy will ultimately, you'll spend all kinds of hours working to have enough energetic money to support a single network of communication and collaboration in a single household of two partners and a couple kids. Now picture it, hosting hundreds of thousands of species, each interacting with this. And now you're up in the quadrillions of interactions happening in the human immune system. So when we see the occurrence of something like a chronic inflammatory state of any sort of disease that we would think of modern, or if we think about an autoimmune disease, meaning that the immune system is now attacking your own organ system as if it was a foreign material, we can appreciate that it was a degradation in life force or a degradation of energy that led to this reactive state of the body. We can see this in our own, social situations. The more exhausted a politician gets, the more inflammatory their lexicon and language becomes. It takes a lot of energy to collaborate, sociopolitically, whether it be in a home or a government or across nation state borders. So the less life force we have as humanity, the more inflammatory our actions are to one another. That same thing is happening down at the immune system level. The less energy available to the immune system, the more inflammatory all the interactions are getting. And pretty soon it does look like a battlefield and everything's at war, including with your own self. And so this advent of the explosion of autoimmune disease that happened in the 1990s and has accelerated every decade since is a symptom of this declining life force energy on the planet due to the incredible weight of herbicide, pesticide, antibiotic industry that's pounding our soil, water, and air systems with these antibiotic chemicals. And so the food system at large has become the nidus for the poisoning of life force. And the result was the emergence in the 1990s of the chronic disease epidemics that we have so embodied today, really on every continent, every peoples who are now suffering. Obesity is the first symptom, the collapse of that microbiome, especially the mitochondria inside of the cell. Following that, you get diabetes, insulin resistance as you start to store the fat in the liver. And so that's the pattern that we keep finding ourselves in now, is this vicious cycle of declining energy due to poisoning of the environment. With declining energy, immune dysfunction occurs, and you get inflammation and autoimmune disease and reactivity across the whole system. Between inflammation and autoimmune disease, we see allergy. And so this would include, the wheat allergy of celiac disease that's become so common and everything else. So inflammation, allergy, autoimmunity is a continuum of a declining life force in the available energies for an immune system to function at the population scale.
Oh my gosh, you touched on so many points there. I feel like I have 10 follow-up questions to that, but I'd love to start with the environment, because you mentioned, our system and the environment. And as we know, there are so many chemicals that are ubiquitous. It's hard to avoid them. We can't avoid them. So what are some of the best practices? What are the biggest offenders, and what can we do to protect ourselves from these environmental toxins?
That's been the work of our laboratory for the last 15 years. We've become one of the global experts in understanding the relationship between glyphosate, which is the most common herbicide used globally. We're pouring about 4 billion pounds of this single chemical into our soil, which ends up in our water systems, which ends up in our rivers, which ends up evaporating into our air, ending up in our oceans. And so about 85% of the rainfall, about 85% of the air we breathe is contaminated with glyphosate, or it's probably 100%, but 85% of it is above the detection rate of this chemical now. And so at 4 billion pounds a year, there's really no greater public health threat than this single molecule now. And we can track disease with exactly the number of acres sprayed with this chemical in every single continent. And for those continents that are not spraying it, they're importing the food, and we can exactly map their chronic disease epidemic in Saudi Arabia, for example, or the UAE. We can map their obesity and diabetes to the amount of imported Western food that's being grown under these chemicals. And so these residues are so easily pinpointed now as not only exact correlation with disease, but my laboratory has been showing the causation of those diseases over the last 15 years. And so there's you can go to intelligenceofnature.com and see the science behind how we've gotten here. And the exciting thing is we wouldn't know any of that if we hadn't been shown by nature the solution before we even knew the scale of the problem or the mechanisms in our lab. So the solution is in the soil. And so we are using fossil soil that we have extracted the carbon intelligence from through a water-based process, and we're pulling that original communication network of soil systems back out of these fossil soils so they can be put back into the human system. And so a human gut that is bathed in chemical milieu of the glyphosate every day, when given back the soil system, we see an immediate return to the original design. And we're talking about seconds. Within seconds of introduction to the fossil soil extracts, you're seeing the human cells return to a level of self-protection and cell-cell communication that we didn't actually know was possible in our modern times. And so we have seen this from the gut cells to the liver cells to kidney cells to blood-brain barrier to neurons. We've studied across many species, human to rodent to cows. We did a 12,000 cattle trial showing the impact of these soil supplements into the cattle feed on a daily basis. It's just a radical reconnection, ultimately, of your microbiome to the original communication network of the microbiome of soil systems that existed pre-human, let alone pre-human chemicals. And so this has been a really beautiful journey, and I think it's just revealed two incredible truths that I hold very dear to my heart now. Number one, nature has never allowed an injury that she didn't already have a solution for.
I just get chills. Okay.
Number two is grace is defined by nature's prediction of the wounds that will come. She has this grace built into her soils from 60 million years ago that we're extracting the solution to the chemicals that we're poisoning her soils with today. And so then she would put the solution right at the point of the future injury, shows us something of the definition of grace. So that's been our general process of discovering, is that the more we trust the nature within us and around us, the revelations around the injuries that we are causing by our chemical environment, whether it be in the household, with our food system, or the extraordinary toxicity of our apparel industry and the amount of microplastics we're absorbing through our skin through fitness and yoga clothes and everything, to the amount of chemicals being absorbed in a woman's skin through her cosmetics, somewhere around 120 carcinogens and endocrine disruptors any given day on a typical interface with the cosmetics industry. And so you put all three of those together, the cosmetics, the apparel, and the food, there's not a moment in a woman's day that she's not being inundated with the toxicity of these antibiotic compounds that are disrupting the relationships that make life possible. And so this is where we find both the wound, but then also turn our attention to the solution in these ancient soil systems. So first of all, get reconnected to food and soil is going to be our long-term goal. And while the supplement, it may be necessary in the short run to get us to this level of intelligence of soil extracts, we have been putting our revenues from that company into our nonprofits, Farmers Footprint, being at the forefront of that, where we're really pouring attention and storytelling into the future in which all of these diseases and chemicals become obsolete, because the farmer remembers a pattern of behavior that is integrated into nature's solutions rather than for extraction.
I'm curious to know how you see this. I'm so grateful for this research that you're doing and what you're finding, and you're offering so much hope as well through your research. And I'm sure everyone listening appreciates that very much. How do you see this scaling?
Well, we are literally at the end of the United States. My company actually was shut down by the FDA in the past year and a half, and we got it back online this year, but we're now suffering through, intense financial journey to try to get back online here through millions of dollars lost from this battle with the FDA. And what we learned in that journey is we have a government structure that has not been built for care of its people. And for that, I've, in the collapse of this American attention, I've sat in front of senators and given them all the science, and we continue to approve, the farm bill as it stands that subsidizes the use of these chemicals throughout the whole country. And then I've sat in front of the EPA with every single hearing they've had to show them the toxicity of the chemicals they keep endorsing and approving, and not a single thing has changed. So 12, 15 years into that journey, I'm exhausted of the American mindset at our governmental and industry levels. And it's been, it came right at the moment of complete hopelessness in me that I found the Middle East. And I have found cultures in the UAE and Saudi Arabia that deeply care for the future generations of their country. I don't know why the United States have lost that care, but from consumers on down, I cannot find enough care in the United States to pivot our behavior and to really embrace these solutions that are being offered by this oil. And in contrast, as soon as I shared not only the level of crisis that Saudi is in, but also then shared the solutions that nature had, there was an immediate attention and gravity felt there, and an immediate endorsement of the vision that we need to start immediately make changes. And so the first country, it looks like, to potentially scale these things to their full potential will be Saudi Arabia at the moment. And so we'll see if that comes to fruition, but they seem to be putting a lot of energy and attention into becoming the global leader in this solutioning, and show how this can be rolled out for 25 million Saudis as a fundamental foundation for public health to address their rates of obesity that are now 60% of adults, their rates of diabetes, 25% of adults, their rates of infertility reaching 68% of their women. And so they as soon as they started importing our chemical food system, their health collapsed. And this is recent. This is from 2000 to current day. So in a short 25 years, one generation, they've seen this fundamental collapse of biology in the kingdom there. And so they are seeing that desperate thing, and they're recognizing that even though they have installed the best hospital technologies the world had to offer because they had the money to do it and the impetus to try to help their peoples roll down national healthcare at a level we could only dream of in the United States, and are addressing, with the highest technology possible, everything from infant going down, they're realizing that's a patch job that's never going to prevent this thing and never going to turn this thing around. And so when it came with a nature-based solution that not only helps their humans, but also restores their ecology, inherent in this system is the restoration of deserts to grasslands. And so as grasslands go back, deserts go into grasslands go into large-scale food production, you start to see this incredible loop, this loop of energy or life force. As the soil system of the desert improves, the supplementation for these with products becomes less necessary. And so come in with nature's long-term solutions and bridge us to 5-10 years from now when Saudi develops food security again and food independence through growing its own food systems locally. And we can start that immediately through growing systems that we've, really seen mastered in the United States and beyond with vermiculture and other intense nutrient dense food production in urban settings. And so for Riyadh and Jeddah, we can put these systems in place very, very quickly, so that within 12 months they're eating the cleanest foods on the planet with the most nutrient density, and the supplements can help make those nutrients more bioavailable than have ever been done. These soil supplements, the soil is showing us so much. The science is showing us these many layers in which a good microbiome supports life. Number one, it accelerates cell-cell communication. A cell with unfettered access to information never gets disease. It's got infinite capacity to repair. It's the failure of communication that leads to the failure of repair and regeneration. And so you give back communication, and it's a magic. Number two, you accelerate all of the pathways of life activation or life force. And so enzymes regulate their production and activity. ATP at the molecular level of the mitochondria accelerates its production. So mitochondria start making 30% more energy without any extra calories. And so you see energy efficiency and energy increase. That leads to this protein synthesis with more enzymatic work, more detox, more cleaning at the system, as well as the laydown of novel elements there, like tight junctions that reverse the leaky gut, leaky vasculature that's global now because of the effect of glyphosate damaging those tight junctions that create those barrier systems. So glyphosate poisoning leaky gut, leaky vascular, leaky brain, leaky kidneys. The soil system comes and repairs that almost on contact. And so cell-cell communication, protein synthesis and acceleration of detox, increased metabolic force and ATP production. And then the final piece that's so critical is nutrient delivery. And so there's been this chronic problem of knowing what nutrients humans need and which nutrients are the medicine for the human body, but we can't get them into the body at a concentration where they become medicinal. And so we've tried things like liposomal preparations and all this. And still, you take the best liposomal curcumin on the market, and you're not going to find any in the urine of that patient an hour later. It's not getting into the system. It's not integrating into the body's spaces of need. Whereas if you suspend those nutrients like curcumin in the ion or in these soil extracts, you get 3,000 nanograms per milliliter in the urine just 30 minutes later. So you're saturating the body with the food elements that perform the medicinal features that we've known since Hippocrates a couple thousand years ago, making it famous on our side of the world. But 9,000 years of Chinese medicine before that was food is thy medicine. Well, the food stopped being our medicine when we started to destroy the microbiome, and therefore lost this carbon matrix that is the ferry that carries the nutrients from the gut into the liver, from the liver into the vascular, from the vascular to a single cell. And that's been the journey we're on. So this multi-tiered approach to the restoration of life through reconnection of soil is showing us the relevance of food systems and the critical importance of a reignition of regenerative practices.
So important, the work that you're doing. I have one more follow-up question with that, and then I want to go back to leaky gut, which you just mentioned. My follow-up question to that is, how do you see your work in Saudi Arabia maybe predicting the future or planning for the future in other areas? Do you see this being replicated? I'm assuming you're going to do your research and maybe track the incidence of disease or the reduction of disease as they implement this program. How do you see that expanding into other areas and the impact on disease?
And that's exactly the goal. So we'll be debuting this in these coming years, I hope, with Saudi and the UAE and others. And Expo 2030 is coming up, which will be in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And this is kind of the coming out for Saudi Arabia to demonstrate how far they've come as a full social and technological revolution has occurred there over the last 20 years. It's been one of the most silent revolutions in which the women were really set free in Saudi when the crown prince really ejected the entire religious police system from the country just a few years back. And women are, practicing the highest levels of sovereignty and self-motivation and leadership throughout the countries now, and self-expression. They're out of the hijab, many of them, and they're driving and doing all the things that, were historically the famous things about Saudi suppressing women. That whole revolution happened very silently and unheralded by the world. And it was, I think, a real demonstration of the desire for this part of the world to really reignite the power of the woman. Again, seeing the decrement in their own society with the dominant masculine, problem here. And so the rising up of women in the Saudi and the government systems of the UAE and the rest are really showing us a path forward for the world in social politics that then leads to a completely different aspect or perspective on industry development within the systems. And so I think that Expo 2030 will be able, if these countries are able to roll this out quickly, we will certainly see far before 2030 the results of a whole population reconnecting to soil science and soil technology. And we will see the acceleration of repair and regeneration on a level that has not been seen in any other peoples worldwide. So I'm very excited about the potential that Saudi has to lead the charge on this. And it is my hope that it reminds every country how important the future children their line is, and that then you start to build all social political systems, all socioeconomic systems around a nature-based value system and a nature-based technology. We have two potential futures. One is a technologic transhumanism that's trying to palliate and patch up with machine and otherwise the human being that is failing, or we have a biologic future in which we don't just go back to some previous normal. We take human biology to a place it's never been before because of our increasing technology and understanding of how to reintegrate nature at a really fundamental level into the biology of the human to reach a place of vitality, a place of metabolic life force in humans that has never perhaps existed before. And so those are our two potential futures: transhumanism and technologic, apocalypse, or a biologic future of thrive state where we really emerge at a place where AI bows down at the feet of humanity in reverence to the technology that lies within her rather than within its machines.
I think we can all get on board with that. Second option, and experience by based.
Thank you for sharing all of that. We will be keeping our eyes and ears peeled for what you discover in the future and how this evolves. It's very exciting. I'd love to bring it back to the gut. You mentioned leaky gut. It's often mentioned in connection with autoimmune disorders. Can you explain it further, how it develops and why it's so important for healing?
Yeah. So once you lose that sense of identity at the cellular level, everything goes downhill in all biologic systems within the human environment or the human ecosystem. So tight junctions are very complex protein structures that involve about 13 different proteins that will constitute what looks like a Velcro type system. One cell wall has a loop or a hook in the other, and so the loop and hook phenomenon complete themselves as a tight junction. And so your gut lining has the largest surface area of any organ system in the entire body. And so your gut lining will cover about a tennis court in surface area. And so you've got, 180 square meters or something ridiculous. And that scale, I just misquoted that size there, but the size of a tennis court will go with there. And so you're at the size of the tennis court for the gut lining, and that's made up of hundreds of billions of tiny little cells that are, half the circumference of a human hair. And they become a single coherent barrier system or intelligent gatekeeper by way of the tight junctions. And so the tight junctions do not form, welds that can't come apart. They're Velcro that can open up and close and close, open and close, just as Velcro can. And so the purpose of the tight junction is to maintain a healthy relationship between what's on the outside of the human body, what's on the inside of the hand. And when the tight junctions start to fall apart, you get a leaky sieve. And so suddenly that gut membrane no longer being able to regulate the relationship between outside and inside. The immune system, 80% of the antibodies produced in the human body are made in the 1 millimeter deep to that, just past that gut barrier. So 80% of your immune system is suddenly churning out antibodies, reacting to everything in your food, everything that you breathe. And so suddenly your air, your water, your food is your nidus for inflammation rather than your nurture. And that's what happens as leaky gut occurs. And this is very frustrating as an individual experiencing this clinically, for the reason that once you are in leaky gut state, it can get so overwhelming to figure out a path forward, because it feels like every single thing you do is undermining your vitality, as everything you do does activate the immune system that's unregulated or unprotected by this tight junction barrier system. Unfortunately, that's only the beginning of the problem, in that once the gut lining breaks down, we've been able to demonstrate in our laboratory that seconds later, the blood-brain barrier falls apart. So signals of the wound at the gut level leads to an immediate echo of that injury at the blood-brain barrier. And so now every blood vessel serving the brain or a peripheral nerve is also breaking apart, and you get this vicious cycle. And so now your neurology, whether peripheral nerves, therefore chronic pain syndromes, fibromyalgia, chronic regional pain, chronic fatigue syndromes, or the more central nervous system effects, which again are chronic fatigue, attention deficit hyperactivity disorders, autism spectrum disorders. In our adults, it's mood disorders as early as our single digits. In teens now, anxiety attacks, panic disorder kind of thing, your major depression, bipolar, psychotic depression states within there. Moving to the geriatric population, then you're in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's syndromes. In between those two, you get MS, ALS, and all these neurodegenerative conditions that have become rampant in the population globally over the last 25 years. So the emphasis and the importance of tight junctions can't be overemphasized. It is the foundation of a healthy human body by defining its healthy compartments, and therefore defining healthy relationships between those, which is what the immune system intends to be.
Thank you for that. You mentioned gut-brain axis. It's so important and it's so powerful, as we are learning. How do stress and sleep affect conditions, any autoimmune conditions like flares, IBS, anything that you mentioned, and what lifestyle practices can help to calm any flares that people experience?
There's a direct relationship between the stress level of the organism, or human here, and its gut microbiome, it turns out. And so really extraordinary studies have been able to demonstrate that when cortisol and other stress hormones are turned on in our body for any form of trauma, it can be emotional trauma, spiritual trauma, physical trauma, as soon as we go through that fight or flight stress response in the body, the hormones that are exerted at the gut lining immediately lead to a decrement in the microbiology of the gut. And so you have a failure of the soil system due to the stress of the macro system. And I think we see this in nature very often, so you get a large scale stressor like chemical farming at some sort of macro level, and the result is all of these downstream stressors feed back on distant soil systems, distant biomes, which suddenly collapse, not being directly related to the chemical injury, but the stress signal that goes out from that chemical farm that was just, poisoned. That soil system sends out, a screaming stress response within minutes of the spraying of its field, which is happening a few times a year typically now. And so with that scream, you get a immediate downstream decrement in river systems, in distant soil systems, air systems, etc. So whether we're talking about the planet or the human being, the stress has an immediate feedback loop that fuels this vicious cycle.
I'm hearing that everything is alive and that we need to treat everything from the soil to our entire ecosystem inside our bodies and in our external environments with respect and care. I love to talk a little bit more about just getting our own hands dirty in the soil. What kind of benefit can gardening have if we, get into our backyards and get our hands dirty? And of course, growing our own food can be beneficial. What are your thoughts on that?
Beautiful. Yeah, and I guess I didn't answer the previous question either, which was, so what is the processes that we would place to reduce that stress, to reduce the downstream damage to the microbiome and our immune systems? And there's obviously an infinite number of solutions there that can be put into play. From ancient traditions, you have things like Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga that have been around for 9,000 years. But ultimately what I find is those people that are most depleted and most desperately needing help don't have the energy to start and practice like that. They don't have the space in the day. They're in damage control from the moment they wake up. They can't sleep. They have no energy to put into an exercise routine. And so what I have found the easiest place to begin to break that interaction between your stress, the collapse of the microbiome, with the collapse of the life force within your body and the vicious cycle there, is nature. And nature immersion takes almost no energy at all. In fact, it's a rest that you're being called to rather than a doing. And so I really find nature immersion, and whole countries are doing this now. Japan is, certainly leading forest bathing as a primary. It's now the most commonly prescribed treatment in all of Japan. Somebody comes in with anything, they're going to be prescribed forest bathing first. And so they have to go out and lay in the forest on the ground, skin on the ground, breathing the air for an hour every few weeks. And so that is the beginning of health for me, and I could thousands of other people around the world as they reintegrate. It does not take energy. In fact, it creates nurture and restoration. And you lay down under a tree and gaze up through the branches at a sky. It turns out that practice resets the neurologic system. And so just gazing up through the chaotic pattern of branches and the leaves flickering puts the nervous system into a relaxed state, and you begin this journey back into rest and digest and kind of this more constructive, rebuilding the root system rather than the pouring out of more energy and more effort and more trying to fix things and more trying to do more so that you feel better. It's really begin in the rest and let nature begin to wrap her arms around you and begin this journey back into vitality through the rest in nature first.
Oh my gosh. I could feel that as you were just describing it. Because I had a recent experience that I didn't know I needed. And it was just a very busy, chaotic day. And I went to take my dog out for her last outing for the night before we were going to sleep. And I took her out, and it was like the transition of summer into autumn. And, I just noticed the stillness in the air, and the trees still had their leaves on them, but there was like just something with the trees speaking to me, like, stay here for a moment. And I did. And it was so unbelievably restorative. And, I sent my dog back inside with my husband. I'm like, take her to bed. I'm hanging out here for a moment. And, just like 5 minutes, it was like, I just felt it like wash over me. And just by doing nothing. And I think what you mentioned is so important, because we, me included, are always in this mindset that we have to keep doing, even self-care. We're like doing, but like to not be doing anything, just being and letting nature like just envelope us around and like within her is so powerful, and not to do anything. So like shifting our mindsets from doing to just resting, like you said, can be so powerful. And that's a hard shift for a lot of us when we're in this like system that is making us constantly move and do things. And it's always a checklist.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think it's a deep lesson in pretty much my last 35 years of being a medical doctor is every time you allow the body to its own intelligence, genius breaks forth. Every time you try to do something to micromanage the body, whether it be, IV drips with your functional medicine biohacking group or your chemotherapy from your medical doctor, either way, you are stressing the body through an effort to force a solution that A, isn't even at the root cause of the problem, but B, is a sledgehammer approach, which nature has never used. Biology is the most nuanced of relationships, and we need to come to terms with that as a group of practitioners globally. We need to come to terms with when nature does things gently. And she has never used a sledgehammer to create life. And she does it through careful, gentle iteration, listening more than doing. Listen to the system, create coordination, see the resources, create synergy, build something more magnificent. So she's been iterating life on Earth for all these billions of years to the state of perfection that we see around us, that we then step out of and destroy, the systems around us for the fear that we're disconnected from it or fear that we got rejected from it. So I think at the root of all human behavior is ultimately this abandonment disorder from nature itself. We believe we got kicked out of the garden. We've been told it by every religious construct out there. We're not good enough. We're sinners. The gods are having either pity or anger upon us. And we've got to break out of this mentality that we are separate from nature. And the first way to experience that, I believe, is something that simply is laying down under that tree and starting to breathe the soil, breathe the air before us for
Mhm. So powerful if we just listen to her and, and get outside and reconnect. What other ways, moving outside and watching the trees and maybe paying attention to the leaves, what other ways in nature can we reconnect? Because, in the modern world, so many of us feel pretty disconnected from nature at this point and the rhythms of nature. How do we get back into that rhythm in a simple, like accessible way?
We see it so powerfully with ions. So as we're doing these soil supplements, we're watching as soon as those tight junctions start to come up, and it creates a little bit of rest in the body. So when your tight junction reservoir increases and you suddenly have a healthy boundary, think about that in your macro relationship. How good does it feel when you finally create a healthy boundary with your parents or with your boss or whatever it is? And a healthy boundary immediately gives you more life force and generative energy. And so we're seeing this at the cellular level with ion. As soon as soils of the ancient intent of your original design in relationship to soil is restored, there's an immediate increase in energy. And I get so excited because the first thing that tends to happen when somebody draws that healthy boundary of the gut lining, vascular lining, blood-brain barrier suddenly intact, creativity kicks in immediately. And their creative energy takes them outside into nature again and again and again. And so rather than prescribing you the nature experience, it'd be cool for you to experience what happens when I tap back into the original design of soil, pre-human. If I tap into that for a moment and really saturate my system, bring up my tight junction network, create healthy boundaries, sense the increased energy, and then sense into what is nature calling me to. Because each of you are indigenous to Earth. We have this popular kind of othering with the term indigenous right now. There's no way you are not indigenous. You formed in your mother's womb by literally utilizing the minerals and substrates of her soils, this earth, to build your body. And so we need to quickly move to the point where we regather that original birthright of being of earth. We are earthlings in that sense. And so your soul may not be from here. It is of here. And it's time to really own that and really step into right relationship with it. So as you begin the journey back into the original soil, what we find is people do something pretty dramatic moments later. And it can be a change of relationship, leave an abusive relationship, or finally leave the job that you've been knowing you should leave for a long time and go start your own, creative experience as a resource to the community around you, whatnot. And so it's these big changes. And so I never know what nature is trying to speak through another's life. And that's as exciting as I don't exactly know why they chose the disease path they did to find their way back to nature. But that ultimately is the solution. That actually is the understanding of the entire human journey. Come into the world as an earthling, complete, as a soul that's always been complete since the beginning of time, the masculine, feminine, everything balanced and harmonious, to be trained into a mindset that you were none of that. You're not balanced. You're not enough. Now you go on a 40, 50-year journey until you find your way into a deep disease that finally leads you back to ask you some core questions like, who the heck am I? Why is this happening? Why isn't anything working to heal me? Why am I dying? Why me, God? And then suddenly everything, will take you back to nature, and you spend that last section of your life expressing the natural inspiration and creativity and relationships that you had always intended to make your priority in your function here. So it will happen to every single one of us. As a hospice doctor, I watch it happen to 100% of people at the last few breaths of life. And I have this deep curiosity of what will it look like when we take the opportunity to come into coherence with that natural call to action that sits within us. When are we going to retrust our own intuition such that we don't have to go on such a deep journey into disease to find the truth? When are we going to start to trust nature at the beginning of the journey and continue to do that? When are we going to stop training our children out of the trust of nature and their belonging to it, and turn them over to their own genius at a younger age, and not force them down the long winding paths of being lost in the wilderness, as we've kind of stepped in here as a modern society, that 40 years lost in the desert, as we hear the Jewish people tell their histories. I think we're all doing that in every single lifetime now. Everybody's doing 40-year journey through the desert, wandering and lost, and repeating the pattern over and over again until they finally are in complete surrender to source and divine. And then suddenly clarity comes, and the next chapter unfolds and opens up. in your life. And as we all tap into this fact that nature is calling us into right relationship, as long as we stay resistant to that, we will continue to increase our suffering and the pain that we hold. Let's surrender to her. We will go into right relationship and find her grace immediately. There is no wound that she's ever allowed that didn't already have a solution. And so step into the solution, and it will come naturally through this reconnection in nature. And we could, in fact, turn this thing around at the 11th hour here. We may not have to go extinct as a species to complete the journey.
That's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I think we spend so much time spinning our wheels, spend so much money on therapy and solutions external to us when we have a free solution outside our doors, and we can utilize that and feel the transformation in such a powerful way just by reconnecting with ourselves and who we once were versus like what's molded us over the years. And we've become this thing. It's kind of, we backpedal into like, where am I? Who am I? And try to find so many solutions to get back there. And it sounds like nature is a very feasible solution for so many of us. And it just like, I mentioned my story just for that short 5 minutes. It was like very powerful. I felt it, and it wasn't like intentional in the moment. It just like kind of grabbed me. I'm like, okay, this is working. So I can only imagine what more time we'll do spending in nature. Thank you for sharing that.
It's beautiful. Yeah. So as you go on this journey, we often find ourselves to be our worst enemy. And so it sounds easy to step into nature and do this thing that's free. When you find yourself falling out of that pattern again and again and unable to really, connect to these resources that are around you, there's a community that's now come forward through our work over the last 15 years. It's called Journey. And we've created a global community around this. You can go to Journey of Intrinsic Health, or you can go to the Zach Bush MD website and get it through the newsletter pathway there. But this is a whole global community of thousands of people that have now been, building a lifestyle and an understanding of how nature integrates into the daily elements of life. And by reformatting your lifestyle to support these relationships in each area of your connection back to nature, that's suddenly your daily routine takes you into this vital health again. So a journey of intrinsic health, that health can only come from within you, was the whole concept of this program that we built over the years out of my clinic, realizing that I was part of the problem. By giving people the perception that they were to come to a doctor for a solution, I was perpetuating the belief that there was something outside of them that they needed. And it's not until I really became a good mirror to my patients to show them that everything you possibly could need is sitting within yourself, and the intelligence your system has to go into right relationship with self, let alone the rest of the world around it, is something far beyond anything that their education system could have ever imbued in me as a doctor or a scientist. So it's really this re-empowerment for me that we're seeing. And so the Journey community is something you can tap into. We've got an online community. It's cheap to participate in. We have an enormous amount of resources in there. The 8-week lecture series that you can go through, that was the heart and soul of our coaching program. We have coaching programs that are relaunching in the new year here. So if you want a coached experience with a group of people going through this deep reconnection lifestyle thing, you can go through something like that. And then we have our favorite, the thing that we've offered so far is our Journey immersion experiences, where we're doing 7-day immersions in nature together in groups of 60 to 160 people at a time in areas of spectacular beauty, original, ecosystem intelligence. And it's the deep immersion in these natures together where we go into a somatic reimagining of our relationship to ourselves. And that somatic remembrance of self is really where we see radical remission and disease emergence and disappearance happening there. So I'm very excited for you to know that there is a whole world out there that even beyond our online community and everything else, there are communities all over the world that are beginning to do the applied science of building a culture, a community, a built world, and an experiential learning environment in which everything that we rage against today goes obsolete. We don't need to rage against the machine. We need to create the world that makes all of that obsolete. That's classic Buckminster Fuller approach to the world. Put no energy into trying to defeat the old systems. put into place the new systems that Nicholas obfuscate. And so this is our opportunity as a public mean analyst. Let's do the applied science of putting nature back into the center of human systems.
Thank you for expanding more on that, and also offering all of those resources, because yeah, you're right. Like we may have this accessible to us, but doing it solo, or in times where you're really just not feeling that, like it's maybe not accessible within you, even going out in nature, there might be something going on where you're not able to connect. And to have a supportive community and the resources you're offering can help maybe bridge that area and allow people to connect more deeply with others, and also those all of the resources available to help them open up to what's possible. So thank you for mentioning that, and we'll share all of this as well as a part of the interview. I'd love to talk about pollinators and why they matter, and what we can do as individuals to support the ecosystem outside of ourselves.
Pollination is such a beautiful relationship between the flora and the fauna of the planet. And so it's this great dance of beauty that inspires this. The pollinators are drawn to the beauty of a plant, whether it be the scent, the electromagnetic field vibration of it, the incredible symmetry that's created in these flowers and things of the flora that will inspire the fauna to come and interact. And so whether it be a moth at night, or the obvious one being the bee during the day, or the butterflies or the hummingbirds, there are so many species, the bats being a critical one. There's so many species that are teeming in the numbers and trillions of organisms worldwide that are so busy seeing the beauty of nature and spreading that beauty through this process of pollination. And so among those pollinating species, there's actually never been one more successful than humans. And so for all of our talk about how much damage humans are doing, it's really worthwhile to take a pause and be like, yeah, we are actually capable of being a keystone species. Keystone species have the hallmark characteristic in which everywhere they go, there's more biodiversity. And humans have done that for millions of years, perhaps, in pre-Homo sapiens. Even the Neanderthals were probably involved in this. And so there's been something in the makeup of the hominids, these biped creatures from monkeys to humans. Not that necessarily was a lineage direction, but we see this behavior in mammals, that they would move beauty from one place to another. And we certainly have done that in spades. Humans have brought the peace flower that's native to South Africa to the whole world. We go into any flower shop and there will be a peace lily somewhere in the mix there. Roses, another ridiculous example of human behavior taking a single plant above the tulips, all of these things. There's an opportunity for us to sit for a moment and just give gratitude to our own capacity to see beauty, and recognize that inspires the pollination and the biodiversification of life in every ecosystem on the planet as we come along as co-creators with the honeybee and the rest, to pollinate a future that will be more beautiful than it ever has been. And that's what I have most confidence in. Whether humans stay and play, or we go and merge back into the cosmos through our release of the human species, we will have done something magnificent here to increase the diversity on the planet. And we will do that through the stress we cause as much as through the beauty of our own gardening and pollination that we might be doing. Stress also creates change and transformation, and nature never goes through an extinction to repeat itself. It always goes into a greater state of imagination, more beauty, more biodiversity, more connection, more intelligence every single time. This is the sixth extinction on the planet at the scale that we've engineered it here. And so this sixth extinction that we're in the midst of is inspiring the reimagination of the entire planet right now. And she's going to explode with more energy than she's ever had, because there's actually more carbon available to her now than in any time in her history, because of the role of the oil companies and everything else of bringing these fossil aquifers of carbon back up to the surface so they can be breathed again. And so nature is about to take her biggest breath that she's ever taken, perhaps. We have this extraordinary carbon load in the planet now, from the CO2 in the atmosphere to the plastics that we've dumped all over the world. Nature is going to pull that back into her respiratory cycle, into the cycle from soil to water to air, and vice versa. And there will be deeper soil systems, deeper microbiology than perhaps ever in human or planetary history within the next 12,000 years. And if we come along to stop the wounding and come along as a keystone species right now to be part of this generative potential, I think she could do it in a matter of decades now, not rare. And so I'm very excited there. So, humans in this moment of awakening to become part of a rapid solution, though we see the most vivid, most beautiful, most bioconnected.
Beautiful. That was, I think, a wonderful way to just seal in our conversation today. You've left us with a lot of hope. And also, I feel very hopeful. And I hope others that were watching are feeling the same with this conversation, that silver lining and the way that you've described it kind of turned around everything that's happening into just a beam of hope and light. And we can all be a part of this solution. And yeah, I think just taking your words today, and if we all just do a little bit and turn inward and project that outward, we're with your guidance and the research you're doing and everything else, I think we'll be good. It feels really good. So gosh, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your research, everything that you've been doing to make the world a better place for both humans and the planet and all of its inhabitants in the soil.
Thank you so much. Blessings to all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Bush.
When it comes to cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, and other chronic illness, what really matters isn't how many books you read, how many webinars you attend, or how much you know. What really matters at the end of the day is what you eat and how you live. The science has given us what we need to know. Now it's time for action. It's time to implement and optimize your healthy lifestyle. It's time to get results. It's time to say goodbye to confusion and hello to clarity. It's time to say goodbye to bad habits and hello to good ones. It's time to fall in love with foods that love you back. It's time to join a community that will support you in achieving your goals. It's time for Whole Life Club.